Shock, Russia will lose land. The US has set its sights on Putin's territories. Russia's territory may soon shrink. Putin's islands are going to Trump. Who really owns the archipelago? And no matter how hard Putin tries, the decision about the US acquiring new territories from Russia will not be made by the Kremlin. What and for how much will he give to Donald Trump? Stay tuned.
A high-profile initiative from the United States. Washington is considering the possibility of buying the Commander Islands from Russia. This idea was voiced by U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Fritz. And judging by how actively this statement is being promoted in the world press, Donald Trump is quite open to making such a deal with the Kremlin.
The United States is presented with a transformative opportunity that could strengthen Arctic security, reunite a divided indigenous population, and reaffirm America's leadership in a rapidly developing region. The proposal is for the United States to pursue a peaceful and pragmatic acquisition of the Commander Islands from the Russian Federation.
Located where the northern Pacific Ocean meets the Bering Sea, this remote archipelago is home to about 676 Russian Federation residents. Its size is approximately 431,000 square kilometers, which is roughly equivalent to the area of California. The price in question is no less than about $15 billion. The estimated valuation includes $6.5 billion for the land itself and $4 billion for the natural resources located on its territory. Another $2.5 billion the US will add for the biodiversity and environmental value of the Commander Islands. And another $2 billion Washington is ready to pay for the local infrastructure. And all this for what? To monitor the potential activity of Chinese submarines.
By acquiring the Commander Islands, the United States would gain a crucial location for deploying advanced underwater surveillance technologies, including an integrated underwater monitoring system, hydroacoustic antenna arrays installed on the seabed, and radar systems integrated with satellites. This directly aligns with the objectives outlined in Section 18 of the Presidential Decree from April 2025 on restoring America's maritime dominance.
At the same time, the American Lieutenant Colonel acknowledges that the very idea of the US acquiring new territories could be controversial against the backdrop of Russia's war against Ukraine. Purchasing territory from the Russian Federation would, in effect, mean transferring funds to an aggressor state. But instead of cash, Washington proposes to allocate $15 billion through humanitarian or environmental programs in order to avoid directly funding the Russian budget. Moscow responded harshly to this initiative from the American colonel, though without much specificity. Maria Zakharova stepped in to speak on behalf of Putin. The official representative of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs called the generous American offer a terrible crime.
This shouldn't even be commented on, since selling out the motherland is considered both by law and by conscience one of the gravest crimes in our country.
But the local residents, upon hearing this news, were genuinely delighted. The prospect of becoming citizens of the United States inspired them. After all, living under Putin is anything but easy for the inhabitants of the Commander Islands.
Before you plan a trip to the Commander Islands, try to find them on the map. And once you see these tiny islands surrounded by ocean, learn that the highest point is 755 meters and that there isn't a single tree here. Then you can decide for yourself whether it's worth coming here or not. Because everything here is ruled by, it's flooding. The weather rules everything here, and it dictates everything.
But the wishes of the local residents alone won't be enough for a fateful deal between the US and Russia. As they admit in Washington, they don't really believe in the success of this undertaking. However, they're also in no hurry to turn down the offer.
After all, Donald Trump, of course, we understand that he is someone who wants to make a lot of deals, financial deals, profitable deals, and deals with Russia as well. But after talking with Vladimir Putin so many times, not once, not a single time has he managed to achieve anything. Conversations about grandchildren, about hockey, about movies, about anything at all except business. Nothing works out with Vladimir Putin. It's impossible to reach any agreement with him.
And in fact, Russia itself does not have the right to dispose of its own Commander Islands, military analysts explain. On such a sensitive issue, Putin relies entirely on Beijing's will. And whatever Xi Jinping says, that's what the Kremlin will do.
Russia is not a sovereign actor. It truly isn't. That's why Trump publicly said, "I have nothing to talk about with Putin." He won't talk to him because Putin no longer influences the processes. He is completely dependent on China, and the further it goes, the more dependent he becomes. And everyone understands this perfectly well.
Donald Trump clearly has some ideas about how to interact more closely with China, what can be done, what can be conceded, where pressure can be applied, and so on. In other words, he clearly has some underlying, well, not just tactics, but an actual strategy, some far-reaching plans regarding China. And that's exactly why such situations arise.
China's growing interest in the Arctic only increases the relevance of the American initiative. Beijing is actively promoting the Polar Silk Road, building Arctic infrastructure, and expanding its dual-purpose fleet. The high-profile statement by the American military sends a clear signal to China that the US is also interested in participating in the Polar Silk Road project and in jointly controlling it with the PRC. But this time, as has generally been the case since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia and Putin are left out of the picture. No one is even considering inviting them to share in the new markets.
Russia has become a proxy state of China, is completely dependent on China, and is no longer independent.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Breaking news. The US is demanding $50 billion for Ukraine. Russian assets will be put to use. Trump will put the squeeze on Putin. Special envoy Whitcoff is urgently flying to Russia. India is killing off Putin's oil. Tankers are stuck. Russia is on the brink. This is the end of Putin's economy. Watch for all the details.
What a piece of news. Putin is ready to end the war, but, as always, only on his own terms. All Ukraine has to do is withdraw its troops from the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, as well as from the so-called DPR and LPR.
As soon as Kyiv announces that it is ready for such a solution and begins the actual withdrawal of troops from these regions, as well as officially notifies of its refusal to pursue NATO membership on our side, an order to cease fire and begin negotiations will follow immediately, literally that very minute.
Zelensky is calling on the international community to bring about regime change in Russia. Otherwise, Putin will continue to destabilize the situation in neighboring countries even after the war in Ukraine ends.
Zelensky is absolutely right, because Putin has unhealthy imperial ambitions that run counter to the idea of peaceful coexistence of states on the European continent. And even after the end of the war in Ukraine, it's clear that he will be planning new aggression. These could be either the Baltic countries or the Scandinavian ones, possibly Poland. But it's clear that Putin has an irrepressible desire to carry out a kind of geopolitical revision and restore Russia's lost influence.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian authorities have initiated an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council after the massive shelling of Kyiv.
The emergency meeting of the UN Security Council on the agenda item maintaining peace and security in Ukraine will take place tomorrow, August 1st. Putin rejects efforts for peace and seeks to prolong his war, but the world has enough strength to stop him through unified pressure and a principled stance in favor of a complete, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire.
But it seems the Russian dictator himself is losing ground. Peskov stated that on July 31st, Putin would deliver a key message directed at Trump. But for some reason, that didn't happen.
It's clear that at this moment, Russia is not confident in its position. They lack, and Putin in particular lacks, the courage to publicly confront the American president. Yes, he tries to fool him, he throws up a lot of smoke and mirrors for Trump, but at the same time, to come out like a man and openly say that these threats don't scare me, I'm ready to counter them. He can't do that. As of now, Putin is not ready for that.
Nevertheless, Trump apparently is taking things seriously and even responded to the recent shelling of Kyiv.
I think what they're doing is disgusting. I think it's disgusting. This is Biden's war, not my war. But I think what Russia is doing is very sad.
The US president also announced his intention to impose sanctions against Russia after a 10-day period.
Yes, we are going to impose sanctions. I don't know if sanctions bother him. They already know everything about them anyway. I know more about sanctions, tariffs, and all that than anyone else. I'm not sure it even works at all, but we're going to do it.
Next, Trump announced yet another visit by Whitcoff.
Yes, he's going to Israel and then he's going to Russia, believe it or not.
Whitcoff often visits Putin like that. But what is the purpose of his visit this time? Could it be that he wants to persuade him to accept Trump's ultimatum?
The story with Whitcoff's trip honestly looks like a complete waste of time on the part of the American administration. And it's obvious that if Trump wants to achieve any progress in terms of a ceasefire, or even more so within the framework of a peace process, then he needs to impose the sanctions he's been threatening Russia with, and clearly he needs to increase arms supplies to Ukraine.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that Trump has plenty of options to influence Russia, but the US would really prefer not to use them. As for Medvedev and his recent nuclear threats toward the US, no one actually took him seriously.
He is essentially not a relevant player in Russian politics. He doesn't make decisions, he's not present at any of the meetings or conversations we've ever had. His words will have an impact in terms of provocation and other things of that nature. I'm not sure he's speaking on behalf of the official Russian position, but he is certainly someone in an official position in Russia who says things that are provocative.
And as it turns out, Putin's desires were already known back in as early as 1994. The German Foreign Ministry found archival documents in which Putin firmly stated that Crimea, eastern Ukraine, and even northern Kazakhstan had never been foreign to Russia, but had always been part of Russian territory.